Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. I wanted to do an episode titled The Fascism of the Grant Recipients, because I made this history of the Romanian elites, and the last chapter is how things evolved after 1990. And incidentally, I know a lot about how things evolved after 1990 because I was part of it. Not only was I alive, but I was also, as I said, I was employed by some of these think tanks. I joined the party that the grant recipients made, and I saw their evolution from early on until today, and how they switched from what they were in the 1990s, human rights advocates, to being advocates of fascism, militarism, imperialism, and even domestic terrorism, and how they are the implementers of the crackdown on freedom of speech, on censorship of all kinds, and they're also behind the newest development, the assassination lists with political opponents. But I will do this in a subsequent episode, a more general take on how the United States sponsors such tools of imperialism in all the areas that it controls or that it wants to control. So according to the region, they either sponsor left-wing extremists, right-wing extremists, liberals who then turn out to be advocates for concentration camps and so on. So it depends on the local conditions, what the sovereignist solution is in every place. In the case of Iran, because it's a theocracy, they sponsor Maoist guerrillas. In the case of Ukraine, because it was a, let's say, social democratic regime, they sponsored neo-Nazis. So the United States has no ideology, has no preferred ideology. It sponsors whoever. Muslim extremists in Xinjiang and in Chechnya against China and Russia. Israel against the Palestinians, advocates for genocide against Muslims while berating other countries for allegedly carrying out genocide and so on. And these grant recipients from the National Endowment for Democracy and all of these other state-sponsored sources just parrot the line and do not mind contradiction, because their bet is that people who follow them and people who consider them a trustworthy information source are not intelligent enough to see the contradiction. And they're most of the times right, unfortunately. But I will do a separate episode on this because it's very lengthy, it's a very big thing, a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack. And I'd like to talk now about the situation in Romania because things are escalating fast. So apparently the drone, the Russian Geran 2 drone that the Romanian authorities said was a Russian one, did not really have a payload of 50 kilograms as a Geran 2 drone should have, and their only evidence that it was a Geran 2 drone, or at least the only one that they stated, was the fact that it was written in Cyrillic on it, Geran 2. And, well, apparently the military did not really collaborate well with what this was supposed to be, because even though the political wing of the operation, so my former colleague Wanat Soiu, went to the United Nations and said that Romania was under attack and invoked Article 4 and everything, the army was apparently less eager to collaborate. So today, the head of the Romanian army and several other generals were charged with corruption by the Anti-Corruption Directorate, which is in the hands of the United States ever since a decade ago under Băsescu. Basically, Romania was the experimental playground for the lawfare operations that were subsequently exported to Latin America. Romania was the first country in which the political class was replaced through means of lawfare. Everybody who was somebody in politics had to go to jail for a while on charges that usually were quite ridiculous just to make a point. So, for example, these generals, the head of the Romanian army, this general Gheorghiță Vlad, is charged with complicity to instigation to abuse of power because allegedly he used his influence to determine an institution of the army to ask the University for Physical Education and Sport to supplement the number of places that it offered without tuition, so tuition-free places. And this way he obtained undue benefits for the daughter of another general who entered on those places without paying tuition fees, and would have had a career in the army subsequently. But she could have had a career in the army even if she paid tuition fees, and tuition fees in Romania are not that big. They're like 1,000 euros a year. So it's like, I don't know. I can imagine that the pro-European public in Romania believes it. I mean, they believe absolutely anything. There's no limit to how retarded the allegation should be for them not to believe it. No, they will believe anything. If it's if the anti-corruption directorate says it, then it doesn't matter how outlandish the charge is. The only thing is, it comes in a very politically charged moment. I mean, 2 days ago, a drone crashed in Galați on an apartment block, and caused a minor fire, probably just from the fuel of the tank. Not, it did not have an explosive payload, because if it had an explosive payload, then there would have been victims, and there would have been serious property damage, especially with 50 kilograms. But apparently the army was not very collaborative, so the army kind of corroborated the story to some extent, but not to the full extent. And probably the Americans would have expected something more from the heads of the army. And since the army did not play ball, they were presented today in a very public way with the press to humiliate them and everything. They were called at the Anti-Corruption Directorate and presented with these charges. Yeah. I'm not surprised that people like my former colleague Oana Tsoiu embarked on this project to claim that this was a deliberate Russian attack and to create hysteria and to somehow bring Romania into the conflict. This is her role there. She was groomed on this scholarship track, on this grant track that I will speak about tomorrow. So she did an internship with the US Embassy, she did an internship with the Israeli Embassy, she did an internship at the World Economic Forum. Her husband works there. And I think she also received the Eisenhower Fellowship, so she was invited to come to the United States to see how democracy works. And then this was all it took for her to become foreign minister and to act in her own capacity. So she's not representing the position of the Romanian state when she goes and says that Russia attacked Romania and that we should respond and that Article 5 and all these things. She's in her own capacity because the president of Romania did not go along with the operation. He initially went along and subsequently he changed his mind because the army briefed him that it was actually a drone that was kinetically interfered with by Ukraine and therefore it was an accident. This is what he claimed. And probably this is why the army is now being punished. So you have generals with anti-corruption charges. The problem that Romania has is that these things happen while Romania is not military occupied. So you have people that are under military occupation and that are fighting back more intensely. I mean, that are fighting back because Romania is not fighting back at all. Even these generals, even people in the army, people who made military oaths, people from the secret services, they don't have the guts, they don't have the balls to say no to the puppet masters from abroad. They have no courage whatsoever because they're afraid of losing their privileges, of charges being levied against them. Okay, sure, but when you make a military oath, I will defend my country with my life. Nobody in Romania took it seriously. I don't know. I asked people from these structures a few years ago. For example, some of them were asking for advice from me. They were in these military structures. They were asking me for advice about how to get fake COVID vaccination certificates or how to how to somehow appear as vaccinated without doing the vaccine. And I told them that I don't do such things, and I will bear the consequences of being unvaccinated until the very end. But they were looking for a solution, and they were looking for a solution in civilian places, because they were too cowardly, essentially, to protest officially and to say that they will not take the experimental jab. And probably it's the same with Ukraine. There's a lot of pressure, and nobody is brave enough to come out and say it. So we have this situation, and yeah, I hope at least passive resistance will be strong, because otherwise the playbook is that Romania will join the war. So at some point, one of these false flags will be interpreted by the Romanian state as an actual attack, and Romania will essentially become a participant in the war without Article 5 backing, because I'm pretty sure that the rest of the countries will not want to aid Romania on a bound capacity. So okay, perhaps they will send some supplies, but they will not declare war or something like this. They will not consider themselves at war because Romania was attacked. Probably the false flag incident will be staged in such a manner as to ensure plausible deniability, as to not count as an attack for NATO, to not count as an attack for the other countries, but Romania, because it is led by this fifth column of people who take orders from the United States, will eventually join the war, will declare itself attacked, and will send troops to Ukraine to cover up the gaps in the Ukrainian defense and so on. So this is what I wanted to tell you today. Tomorrow I'm going to make the episode about fascism of the scholarship recipients, of the Open Society Foundation advocates and grant recipients, and for the human rights activists of the years of the 1990s, of the 2000s, of the 2010s. All of a sudden they discovered that they like nationalism, they like the extreme right, they even like neo-Nazi symbols, just not for Romania, for countries designated by daddy. So until next time, take care. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe. If you want to support me financially, you'll find a link in the channel description how to do so. And until next time.